If an empire tells you not to ask what happened in the fog, you ask who never came back. Nathan Brooks heard those words from his old mentor years before he ever left Earth, and somehow they came back to him the moment the encrypted transmission landed on his desk in Washington. The file was only 12 seconds long. No distress call, no screaming, no alarms. Just the shaky voice of an unknown pilot whispering, "Do not let them erase us," before the signal dissolved into static. According to the official report from the Velker Empire, no ship had ever entered the Nebula of Ash. According to the timestamp buried inside the transmission, somebody was lying. Nathan leaned back in his chair, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and stared through the rain sliding down his office window. 20 years of investigations had taught him one simple truth. Honest people answer questions. Powerful people buried them. His supervisor, Director Claire Donovan, stepped into the room carrying a thin gray folder instead of the usual digital tablet. That alone told Nathan the assignment had already become political. She placed it on his desk without sitting down. "This came through diplomatic channels an hour ago," she said quietly. "The Empire says there's nothing to investigate." Nathan looked up. "Then why send me?" Claire let out a tired smile. "Because somebody wanted us to hear that recording before somebody else deleted it." Nathan opened the folder. One missing research vessel. 23 crew members. No wreckage. No rescue mission. No surviving witnesses. Every official document from the Empire repeated the same phrase. Navigation accident. Closed investigation. He frowned. 3 different reports. Same wording. Claire nodded. "Exactly." Nathan closed the folder. People don't repeat the same sentence unless somebody told them to. 2 days later, his shuttle crossed into Velker territory. The stars seemed dimmer there, hidden behind an endless curtain of silver-gray vapor stretching for millions of miles. Even from orbit, the fog looked wrong. It moved too slowly, almost like it was breathing. The docking controller welcomed him with flawless manners, careful smiles, and just enough warmth to feel rehearsed. "Investigator Brooks," the alien official said as they walked through the polished terminal. "We hope your visit is brief. There is truly nothing to concern yourself with." Nathan smiled politely. "That's usually when I start getting concerned." The official laughed a little too quickly before changing the subject. Nathan noticed everything. The security officers avoided looking toward the distant observation windows facing the fog. Maintenance crews stopped talking whenever he passed. Even the station announcements skipped Gate 12, as though that section of the terminal no longer existed. None of it proved anything. Together, it proved everything. Later that evening, Nathan ordered black coffee from a nearly empty diner overlooking the docking bays. The elderly waitress quietly placed the mug in front of him without saying a word. As she turned away, she slipped a folded paper napkin beneath his hand. Nathan waited until she disappeared into the kitchen before opening it. 3 words were written in uneven English. "They remember everyone." He looked toward the kitchen, but she was already gone. When he stepped outside, a cold breeze rolled across the landing platform from the distant fog. Beyond the lights of the station, the silver clouds stretched across the darkness like an ocean hiding something far older than any empire. Nathan stared at them for a long moment before quietly speaking to himself. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I stop asking for permission." Nathan did not wait for sunrise. He left the station before most of its residents had finished their first cup of coffee, carrying nothing more than a weatherproof field bag, a handheld scanner, and the same worn leather notebook that had followed him through every investigation of his career. The shuttle assigned to him was small, quiet, and almost insultingly ordinary. That was exactly how he liked it. Expensive equipment attracted attention. Ordinary equipment let people underestimate you. The navigation computer projected a warning across the windshield. Restricted zone. Clearance required. Nathan entered the authorization code Earth had negotiated with the Empire. The screen paused for several seconds before finally allowing him through. "Funny," he muttered. "Computers usually do not hesitate unless somebody tells them to." As the shuttle drifted farther from the station, the stars slowly disappeared behind layers of silver fog. Visibility dropped from several miles to less than 300 feet. Every few minutes the sensors flashed with ghost readings that vanished before the computer could identify them. Nathan switched the automatic scanner off and relied on manual readings instead. Machines could be fooled. Patterns usually could not. After another 15 minutes, his radio crackled. Investigator Brooks, this is Patrol Vessel 17. You have entered a protected environmental zone. Turn around immediately. Nathan pressed the transmit button. I have authorization. A pause followed. Your authorization does not include this sector. Nathan glanced at the coordinates. They matched exactly with the route approved the previous evening. Interesting, he replied calmly. Yesterday it did. Silence answered him. Then the transmission ended without another word. He smiled to himself. Somebody wanted him to leave before he found something worth seeing. An hour later, he reached a lonely maintenance platform floating inside the fog. According to every public navigation chart, the structure did not exist. Yet there it was, weathered, operational, and receiving fresh power from hidden generators. Nathan docked without asking permission. The platform looked abandoned until an elderly alien engineer stepped out carrying a toolbox. The old man froze the instant he recognized the human visitor. You should not be here, he whispered. Nathan kept his hands where they could be seen. I have heard that a lot since arriving. The engineer looked nervously toward the dense fog surrounding the station. They monitor everything. Nathan studied the man's face. The fear was real. Not fear of Nathan. Fear of being overheard. I am only looking for a missing research ship, Nathan said. The engineer slowly shook his head. No. You are looking for the question that destroyed the people on that ship. Nathan felt the weight of those words settle in his mind. Before he could ask another question, a loud chime echoed across the platform. The engineer's expression changed instantly. He grabbed his toolbox and hurried toward an access corridor without another sentence. 30 seconds later, two uniformed Imperial inspectors stepped onto the landing pad, wearing polite smiles that never reached their eyes. Routine inspection, one of them said pleasantly. We were not informed that an Earth investigator would visit this facility. Nathan returned the smile. Neither was I. The inspector glanced toward the docking log displayed on a nearby terminal. You have been here exactly 8 minutes. Nathan nodded. Long enough to realize somebody keeps forgetting to erase this place from your internal records. For the first time, neither inspector answered. Nathan quietly wrote one sentence inside his notebook before closing it again. Somebody was not hiding a location. Somebody was hiding a memory. The Imperial inspectors never raised their voices. They simply watched Nathan with the patient confidence of people who believed time was on their side. One of them offered a polite smile. You have seen everything there is to see here, Investigator Brooks. Nathan looked around the weathered platform one more time. Fresh maintenance marks covered the floor. New power conduits disappeared beneath old metal plating. Somebody had invested millions of credits keeping a place alive that officially did not exist. That is funny, Nathan replied, because it feels like I have only started looking. The taller inspector folded his hands behind his back. Curiosity has caused unnecessary diplomatic misunderstandings before. Nathan nodded. Truth usually does. Neither alien answered. Instead, they escorted him back to his shuttle with flawless manners, never once threatening him, never once touching him. Somehow that made the encounter even more unsettling. As soon as he cleared the platform, Nathan redirected the shuttle deeper into the fog instead of returning to the station. His navigation display immediately lost satellite synchronization. The compass spun twice before freezing. Outside the windshield, the silver haze became so dense that it swallowed every point of light. There were no stars, no planets, no horizon, only shifting clouds drifting across empty space. He reduced speed to less than 20 miles per hour and switched to passive sensors. Every instinct told him to turn back. Every year spent as an investigator told him that fear usually pointed toward the truth. 10 minutes later, the scanner detected a metallic reflection nearly 1,000 feet ahead. Nathan eased the shuttle forward until a massive silhouette slowly emerged from the fog. It was a ship, not damaged, not drifting, simply floating in perfect silence. He recognized the hull design immediately. It belonged to the missing research vessel listed in Claire Donovan's folder. The registration numbers had been burned away, yet faint outlines remained beneath the polished surface. Nathan whispered to himself, "You were never destroyed." He docked carefully against an emergency access port. The interior lights still worked. Soft white illumination stretched through spotless hallways that looked as though the crew had stepped away only minutes earlier. Coffee mugs rested on tables. Data screens remained active. Chairs stood exactly where someone had left them. There was no sign of panic. No sign of evacuation. No sign that 23 people had simply disappeared. Nathan walked slowly, recording everything with his body camera. In the main operations room, he found a wall-sized star chart. Hundreds of navigation routes filled the display, but one region had been erased so cleanly that the empty space almost looked intentional. Someone had not deleted a destination. Someone had removed the memory that a destination had ever existed. He opened a storage locker and found neatly folded uniforms. Every crew badge had been removed. Every family photograph had disappeared from personal quarters. It was as though the people themselves had been edited out of history. Then he heard it. A quiet clicking sound somewhere below the deck. Nathan remained perfectly still. The noise stopped. He waited nearly 30 seconds before moving again. Another click echoed through the corridor, followed by the faint hum of machinery that should not have been running after years of abandonment. He followed the sound until he reached a sealed security door. A small control panel blinked with fresh power. The display showed one line in plain English instead of the Empire's language. Access denied. Memory archive active. Nathan stared at the words, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air inside the ship. He slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out his notebook, and wrote another sentence before closing it. They did not erase the witnesses. They built a machine that erased the evidence they ever existed. De la fan type Theo dung ban. The security panel remained illuminated as though someone had walked away only moments earlier. Nathan rested his fingertips against the cold metal beside the display instead of touching the controls. He had learned years ago that the fastest way to lose evidence was to rush toward it. He crouched, studying the frame around the sealed door. There were no scratches from forced entry, no emergency override marks. The mechanism had been opened and closed countless times, but always by someone with permission. "So who are you protecting?" he murmured. His scanner emitted a soft tone. Hidden power lines extended beyond the wall in directions that did not match the ship's published blueprint. Nathan compared the readings with the layout stored in his tablet. Entire sections of the vessel had been erased from the official plans. He smiled to himself. There you are. A maintenance hatch sat behind a stack of supply crates that looked deliberately forgotten. It took him less than a minute to remove the panel. The crawl space beyond was narrow enough that he had to move on one knee at a time. Dust covered the outer pipes, but the ventilation system was spotless. Someone was still servicing this place. After nearly 40 feet, the passage opened above a dark chamber. Nathan carefully lowered himself onto a metal platform and froze. The room stretched far beyond the dimensions the ship should have been able to contain. Endless rows of illuminated storage columns filled the chamber from floor to ceiling. Thousands of transparent memory crystals glowed behind protective glass, each labeled with dates reaching back hundreds of years. This was not a laboratory. It was an archive. He stepped toward the nearest console. The interface immediately displayed a warning. Authorized Imperial historians only. Nathan removed a small portable reader from his bag and connected it through a universal adapter instead of attempting to bypass the system. The display hesitated before allowing limited access. File after file appeared across the screen. Colony reports, diplomatic meetings, scientific expeditions, entire civilizations cataloged with astonishing detail. Then Nathan noticed something impossible. Every few hundred records, a sequence had been replaced by empty identification numbers. The files had not been corrupted. They had been intentionally removed while preserving the surrounding archive. Someone wanted future historians to know the records once existed, but never know what they contained. Nathan quietly opened one surviving reference attached to an erased section. A short maintenance note appeared. Cross-reference relocated under fog containment directive. Access permanently sealed by Imperial authority. His heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Whenever the truth became larger than expected, he always became calmer. Panic made people careless. Patience uncovered patterns. He copied the reference number into his notebook just as footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the storage rows. Nathan switched off the reader and slipped behind a towering archive column. Two Imperial officials entered the chamber wearing formal robes instead of military uniforms. Their conversation carried clearly through the silent room. "The annual verification begins tomorrow," one of them said. "Has the Earth Investigator been redirected?" The second official sighed. "Not yet. He keeps asking questions that normal visitors never ask. Then perhaps he will eventually lose interest." The older official shook his head. Humans rarely do. They continued walking until their voices faded into the distance. Nathan remained perfectly still for another full minute before breathing again. The Empire was not afraid that someone would steal their technology. They were afraid someone would read their history. As he prepared to leave, his eyes caught one final crystal sitting alone inside a reinforced case. Unlike every other record, it carried a simple handwritten label instead of an official archive code. In careful English, someone had written only 4 words. They deserved to remember. De la fan teep theo, jung gwyn mok trian, nen vat va boi, can nu kak fan truok. The crystal remained locked behind reinforced glass, almost as if someone had wanted it to survive longer than the Empire itself. Nathan did not touch it. He simply photographed the handwritten label and stepped away. Physical evidence could disappear. A photograph stored in 3 separate encrypted drives was much harder to erase. As he turned toward the exit, a faint sound drifted through the archive. It was not an alarm. It was music. Soft, slow piano notes echoed through the endless rows of memory columns. Nathan stopped walking. The melody felt strangely familiar, the kind played in old American diners late at night when the last customers lingered over cold coffee. It did not belong on an abandoned research ship hidden inside forbidden space. He followed the sound until he reached a narrow observation room overlooking another sealed chamber below. A single alien sat quietly at an old wooden desk surrounded by stacks of printed books. Nathan blinked. Printed books. In an empire that stored nearly everything digitally, the sight felt almost impossible. The elderly alien looked up without surprise. Pale blue skin stretched over a tired face marked by centuries of quiet regret. "You finally found me," the old man said in clear English. Nathan remained cautious. "You knew I was coming?" The old alien smiled faintly. "No, I knew someone from Earth eventually would." Nathan entered the room slowly. "Who are you?" "My name no longer exists in Imperial records," the old man replied. "Long ago I was the chief Imperial historian." Nathan studied the shelves behind him. Every book carried handwritten notes in different languages from dozens of civilizations. "Why keep paper copies?" he asked. The old historian gently closed the book in front of him. "Because computers obey orders. Paper remembers." Nathan pulled up a chair, but did not sit. "Tell me about the missing ship." The old historian looked toward the fog beyond the observation window. The crew discovered something they were never supposed to discover. They believed history was incomplete. They were correct. Nathan folded his arms. "The archive is full of missing records." "No," the historian answered quietly. "The archive is full of missing people." Nathan felt a chill settle across the room. The old alien continued before Nathan could speak. "Every civilization believes history is written by the winners. That is only half true. History is also edited by the survivors. My empire did not conquer every world through war. Sometimes we simply erased proof that a people had ever existed." Nathan frowned. "Why?" The historian closed his eyes for several seconds. "Because remembering them would have forced us to remember our greatest failure." Nathan waited. Silence often encouraged people to reveal more than another question ever could. Finally, the old alien stood and walked toward a faded star map hanging on the wall. Near the center of the map rested a region completely covered in gray ink. "Everything begins there," he whispered. "The fog is not hiding a weapon. It is hiding our shame." Before Nathan could ask another question, the lights flickered once. A quiet chime echoed through the archive. The historian's expression changed instantly. "They know you are here." Nathan glanced toward the hallway. "Can you come with me?" The old alien slowly shook his head. "My time belongs here. Yours does not." He reached beneath the desk and handed Nathan a small brass key unlike any piece of Imperial technology he had seen. "There is one door the computers cannot open," the historian said. "Machines were never trusted with what waits behind it." Nathan accepted the key without another word. As he slipped it into his pocket, he realized something that unsettled him more than every hidden archive he had uncovered. The Empire had spent centuries protecting a secret, but the people guarding it no longer believed it deserved to stay hidden. The archive lights dimmed to a soft amber as Nathan slipped the brass key into his jacket pocket. Somewhere beyond the endless shelves, heavy security doors began closing one after another with slow mechanical certainty. Nobody was running. Nobody was shouting. That bothered him more than an alarm ever could. Calm organizations usually had well-practiced plans. He looked back at the elderly historian. If they know I am here, they know you helped me. The old alien smiled with quiet acceptance. They suspected me many years ago. Today only confirms what they already believe. Nathan hesitated for a moment. Walking away never became easier, no matter how many investigations he completed. There has to be another exit. There is, the historian replied. But only one of us still has work to finish. Nathan understood. Some people survived by leaving. Others stayed because someone had to protect the truth until another person arrived. He gave a respectful nod before disappearing into the narrow service corridor behind the archive. The passage twisted beneath the abandoned ship like the hidden hallways inside an old courthouse. Fresh air drifted through unseen ventilation shafts. The place was still operating. Every few minutes Nathan spotted maintenance markings less than a week old. The Empire had never abandoned this vessel. They had simply hidden it in plain sight. At the end of the corridor, he found an enormous circular door built from dull gray metal instead of the polished alloys used throughout the ship. There was no electronic lock, no scanner, only a weathered brass keyhole waiting beneath a layer of dust. Nathan slowly removed the key. "You really did not trust computers," he whispered. The key turned with surprising ease. Deep inside the mechanism, ancient gears shifted with a low metallic rumble. The door opened only a few inches before stopping on its own, releasing a cool breeze that carried the faint scent of old paper instead of machinery. Nathan slipped through the opening and found himself standing inside a vast underground chamber carved directly into solid rock. For a long moment, he simply stared. The room was larger than any government archive he had ever visited on Earth. Towering shelves stretched into darkness, filled not with memory crystals, but with handwritten journals, maps, photographs, printed reports, children's drawings, personal letters, and worn leather-bound books from hundreds of civilizations. Nothing here depended on electricity. Nothing here could be rewritten with a software update. Above the entrance, a carved stone inscription appeared in both the Imperial language and English. The records they refused to delete. Nathan walked slowly between the shelves. One journal described the final days of a colony that officially had never existed. Another contained family photographs whose faces matched the empty identification numbers he had discovered earlier. Every shelf represented lives that history had quietly erased while ordinary people across the galaxy continued believing the official version. Nathan stopped beside a faded photograph of smiling children standing in front of a school beneath unfamiliar stars. Someone had written on the back in careful handwriting, "If you remember us, then we are not completely gone." He closed his eyes for a second before placing the photograph exactly where he had found it. This investigation had stopped being about one missing ship hours ago. It had become something far heavier. It was about every voice someone powerful had decided the future did not deserve to hear. Then his communicator vibrated for the first time since entering the fog. Against every expectation, a secure transmission broke through the interference. Claire Donovan's voice arrived weak, but recognizable. "Nathan, listen carefully. We intercepted Imperial communications. They are not trying to arrest you anymore." Nathan frowned. "Then what are they doing?" Several seconds of static filled the silence before Claire answered. "They are sealing the entire fog region. Whatever you found, they are terrified you might leave with it. Tra-teep fan 7 Theo dung yu ka kwa ban." Claire's transmission ended before Nathan could answer. The signal dissolved back into static, leaving only the quiet hum of the underground archive. He slipped the communicator into his pocket and looked around one last time. Every shelf represented lives that someone had decided the galaxy should forget. Walking away felt wrong. Staying would accomplish nothing. He reached into his bag and removed a small optical drive, copying every catalog index he could access without disturbing the original records. The files themselves were too large to extract, but the index alone proved the archive existed. Sometimes evidence was not about showing everything. Sometimes it was about proving someone had lied. As he secured the drive, a low vibration rolled through the stone floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere above, massive engines were coming online. Nathan followed another narrow corridor marked only by faded arrows painted decades earlier. The passage climbed steadily until it opened onto a circular observation deck carved into the side of the cavern. What waited beyond the reinforced glass stopped him cold. The fog was no longer just outside the abandoned ship. It filled an enormous hollow stretching for miles beneath the surface, swirling in slow, silent currents around something so immense his mind struggled to understand it. At first he thought he was looking at a mountain. Then the mountain breathed. The movement was almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Layers of silver mist rolled gently across a surface that resembled dark stone until a faint pulse of blue light moved beneath it like blood beneath skin. Nathan instinctively stepped closer to the glass. "That is impossible," he whispered. The thing resting inside the cavern dwarfed every warship he had ever seen. Its shape refused to resolve completely through the shifting fog. Curved ridges disappeared into darkness. Vast structures that looked like cliffs slowly revealed themselves as part of a single sleeping form. There were no chains, no prison walls, only the fog itself, endlessly circling as though performing a task it had repeated for centuries. A calm voice spoke from behind him. "Beautiful, is it not?" Nathan turned to find Empress Lysara standing alone at the entrance. She wore no ceremonial guards and no visible weapons. Her pale blue skin reflected the silver light drifting through the chamber, making her appear almost ghost-like against the ancient stone. Nathan did not move. "I expected soldiers. They would not help," she answered softly. "Not here." She walked beside him and looked through the glass without taking her eyes off the sleeping giant. "Every visitor assumes we are hiding a superweapon." Nathan kept his voice even. "Are we not?" Lysara slowly shook her head. "Weapons obey. This does not." Silence settled between them. Nathan watched the slow rhythm beneath the fog while searching her expression for deception. Instead, he found exhaustion, the kind carried by someone who had protected the same burden for far too long. "The missing research crew found this place," Nathan said. "Yes." And then they disappeared. The Empress closed her eyes briefly, because once they understood what they had discovered, they could never return to ordinary life. Some chose to remain. Others asked for their records to be erased. Not because we forced them. She finally looked directly at Nathan. Because they believed the truth would tear the galaxy apart before it could save it. Nathan looked back toward the sleeping Colossus. Everything he had believed about the Empire was beginning to shift. They had not hidden this secret to protect their reputation alone. They had hidden it because if fear spread faster than wisdom, entire civilizations might rush toward a disaster they did not yet understand. Then, without warning, another pulse of blue light rippled beneath the fog, brighter than before. The observation deck trembled almost imperceptibly, and for the first time since entering the cavern, Empress Lysara's calm expression cracked. Barely above a whisper, she said, "It has never responded to a human presence before. Truok het, de la fan teep noi theo dung mok trien vayuka quaban." Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Nathan kept his eyes on the enormous shape beneath the fog, while the blue light slowly faded back into darkness. The silence inside the observation chamber felt heavier than any argument either of them could have had. Finally, Nathan broke it. "You said it has never reacted to a human before." Empress Lysara nodded without looking away from the glass. "Not once in over 800 years. Nathan crossed his arms. "Then maybe your records are incomplete." A faint smile appeared for the first time on her face. That would be the most human explanation possible. She touched a small control panel built into the stone railing. The reinforced glass slowly became transparent, revealing details that had been hidden beneath layers of reflected light. The fog was not drifting randomly. Countless streams of silver vapor flowed in perfect circular patterns around the sleeping giant, weaving together like an endless network of rivers. Nathan watched carefully until the pattern finally made sense. "That is not weather," he said quietly. "No," Lysara replied. "It is a containment system." She pointed toward dozens of towering structures positioned around the cavern. "Those towers generate the field. The fog carries microscopic stabilizing particles. As long as the circulation continues, it remains asleep." Nathan looked back at her. "And if the system fails?" She answered with complete honesty. "We do not know." There was no drama in her voice, no attempt to frighten him. Somehow that made the answer even more unsettling. Nathan took a slow breath. "So your empire built its entire reputation on strength, while secretly spending centuries maintaining something it barely understands." Lysara gave a tired laugh. You are beginning to understand our history. She walked toward an old control console that looked far older than the Empire itself. When our ancestors found this place, they believed they could study it. They were wrong. When they tried to leave, strange phenomena followed them across nearby systems. Entire populations abandoned their homes after witnessing things they could not explain. Fear spread faster than facts. Nathan listened without interrupting. Eventually, our predecessors made a decision, she continued. Seal this place. Erase every public reference. Build an empire strong enough to keep curious civilizations away. Nathan looked down at the optical drive resting safely inside his pocket. And every generation kept repeating the same lie. Every generation inherited the same burden, she corrected gently. There is a difference. Nathan wanted to disagree, but he could not. He had spent enough years investigating governments to know that some secrets began with selfish motives and survived because nobody could imagine a safer alternative. A soft tone interrupted the conversation. One of the monitoring displays flashed amber. Several streams of silver fog had begun moving faster than before, forming new currents that spiraled toward the center of the cavern. Technicians appeared on distant platforms, calmly adjusting controls without panic. Lasara's expression became serious again. It is responding to your presence. Nathan frowned. I have not done anything. Exactly, she answered. That is what frightens us. He stepped closer to the transparent barrier, studying the slow movement beneath the fog. For a brief moment, he thought he saw something resembling an enormous eye far below the surface before the mist quietly covered it again. Then another thought entered his mind, simple enough to make his stomach tighten. The missing researchers, he said. They did not discover the creature. Lasara slowly turned toward him. Nathan finished the sentence before she could answer. They discovered that it was waiting for someone. The Empress closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was no trace of royal authority left in her face. There was only quiet concern. Investigator Brooks, she said softly. I believe that someone may be you. Nathan stood in silence, letting the Empress's words settle without rushing to answer. He had spent most of his life believing every mystery could be solved if enough evidence was collected. This one was different. Facts alone were not enough. They demanded judgment. He slowly removed the optical drive from his pocket and held it in his hand. Inside it were enough records to expose centuries of deception. Enough to bring down governments, rewrite history books, and destroy every ounce of trust the galaxy still had in the Empire. Lasara watched him carefully. You could broadcast everything, she said. No one could stop you now. Nathan looked through the transparent barrier toward the endless currents of silver fog. That is true. Then why are you hesitating? He smiled faintly. Because I have spent my career proving what happened. I have also learned that when people hear a truth they are not ready to carry, they often replace one disaster with another. The Empress said nothing. She simply waited. Nathan turned the optical drive over in his fingers before sliding it back into his jacket. The galaxy deserves the truth, he said. But the truth is not the same as panic. He opened his communicator and finally established a stable connection with Claire Donovan. Her voice arrived immediately. Nathan, are you all right? I am. Did you find what they were hiding? Nathan looked once more at the sleeping giant beneath the fog. Yes. Claire waited. Send everything. Nathan took a slow breath. I am sending the archive index, the erased historical records, and enough documentation to prove the Empire concealed entire civilizations and manipulated history. That belongs to everyone. And the rest? She asked quietly. Nathan looked toward Lasara. She gave no sign of approval or objection. The decision was his alone. The exact location of this place stays classified. Claire remained silent for several seconds before answering. That is not the choice I expected. Nathan nodded to himself. Neither did I. He transmitted the files. Across the galaxy, investigators, historians, journalists, and ordinary citizens would soon begin asking questions the Empire could never silence again. The lies would end. The records would return. Forgotten names would finally be spoken aloud. Yet the coordinates of the fog remained locked behind the strongest encryption Earth possessed. Some doors, Nathan realized, were meant to be opened only when wisdom arrived before curiosity. Hours later, his shuttle departed the hidden station. No patrol ships followed him. No threats came over the radio. The Empire did not celebrate. It simply watched the human investigator disappear into open space, carrying a burden that now belonged to both civilizations. As the silver fog slowly vanished behind him, Nathan opened his notebook one last time. Beneath every observation, every question, and every clue, he wrote a final sentence. The strongest people are not the ones who uncover every secret. They are the ones who know which truths must heal the future instead of feeding fear. He closed the notebook and looked out at the stars returning one by one beyond the fading mist. Somewhere behind him, the forgotten archive still waited. Somewhere ahead, children across countless worlds would grow up learning a history that was finally honest. Nathan realized that civilizations were not defined by the mistakes they tried to hide. They were defined by the courage to remember them. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest strength. Humans did not become extraordinary because they were the most powerful species in the galaxy. They became extraordinary because when they finally held the truth in their hands, they chose responsibility over revenge. Far behind the departing shuttle, deep beneath the quiet sea of silver fog, the ancient giant remained asleep, and for the first time in centuries, the currents around it moved with a calm, steady rhythm, as though even the oldest secret in the galaxy understood that hope had finally found someone worthy of carrying it.